to another episode of New Orleans Basketball and New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I'm your host, Raphael Rattler, joined with my fellow middle brother, Garrick Rattler. What's poppin' with you, bro?
What up, bro? Nah, man, and we in full swing, man. Full swing now. I'm a happy person now, man. I got college football in my life. Shout out to my brother for our brother for refereeing that game out in Vegas. But yeah, man, we got college football back. The FIBA is getting into the real nitty gritty of the tournament and the games. Some teams looking a little stronger than the others. And yeah, man, and the NFL is right down the street as well. So we are in a full swing of things. So I'm a happy person. Obviously the W is still going on in effect, but it's just like my sports nirvana is coming. It just things feel right in the world, man. It was a tough stretch. FIBA and the W got us through it. The TBT, shout out to Slam Ball and the Big Three. But there's nothing like college football. Waking up on Saturdays, a college game day is playing. The Tulane, shout out to Tulane for getting the dub. UL got the dub. LSU did not get the dub.
No, they did not.
But it is what it is. But yeah, it's just nothing about like college football and the NFL season. And then when you start to get the NBA news around the corner and training camp, it's just that time of the year is always a good time for me. So I'm basking in it, man. I'm basking in it. How's everything on your side?
Everything is blessed. You're right. Like if it feels right, like we woke up on Saturday morning. We had our family duel because my wife went to Oklahoma. I went to Arkansas. So we had a debate on who we were cheering for that day. But nah, man, it feels great. Like it's crazy. Like when you were kids, you couldn't wait for the summertime because like that was the time where you do have to go to school. Nothing. As an adult, you're like, man, the summertime kind of trash, bro. It's 100 degrees every day. You still gotta go to work. There's no sports like on TV like that. So again, I'm excited for the fall, but and I'm excited for what we got going on in New Orleans Basketball. Before we get too far into the show, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter, follow us on IG, follow us on TikTok. That's NO Basketball, no E. Like the episode below. Make sure you subscribe to New Orleans Network. I promise you will not forget it. New Orleans Football. Shout out to their launch going on this week as well with the Saints coming up with their home opener and things like that. Anything with New Orleans in front of it, again, it's gonna be taking off this fall. We'll just put it that way. So you talked about FIBA. Let's talk about it a little bit. So Brandon Ingram was moved to the bench. You and I kind of talked about this. It was either he goes to the bench or someone else who they refused to put on the bench was going to go to the bench. So the most likely scenario was that Brandon Ingram would fall into that role that they kind of wanted Ant to play, like the D-Wade off the bench, the scorer that comes in. And you saw he looked a lot more comfortable with the ball in his hands. He came in the game, the first game he came off the bench. He came in, he had like 5 assists in the first like couple of minutes. Like it was Brandon Ingram again, right? In this last game, even though they dropped that one to JV's Lithuania, you saw Brandon Ingram kind of get going with that second unit and kind of get into a flow before ultimately they were just too far behind to kind of catch up from. But what did you see from, Brandon Ingram's adjustment basically? And, he's made the biggest adjustment thus far, as I would say in terms of the star players on this team. But what would you say, or what would you rate on how he's handling it, how the U.S. is handling, and like what's their outcome coming up with? This is the final week of the tournament.
Yeah, I think it's an exercise in maturity that we're watching with Brandon Ingram because, again, this is a guy who is still fairly young in his career, is still trying to prove himself, right? And so we saw, other players go through similar situations, right? And obviously this is apples to oranges, but when Kyrie was with LeBron, right, and he was still young and wanted to find himself and establish himself as the guy that he thought he was, it was difficult for him to kind of understand and accept that, co-pilot role, right? And then he got to go out with Boston and he saw how hard it was to kind of do some of those things. But as he matured, you start to see him fill into roles and not be as complete. And I think it's very similar with Brandon Ingram, where this is a young guy still trying to establish himself. It could have been very easy for him to be like, I'm not going to the bench. Somebody else got to go to the bench, or I'm a max contract player. I'm not going to the bench, or, whatever the case is. But, he's accepted it. He still, he looks more comfortable. And he does have the ball in his hand. It's still a little a wonky fit because you just changed it in the middle of the tournament, and so now he's trying to get adjusted and acclimated to the guys that are on the floor with him. But he does look more confident. He does look more like himself. You see this new phase of Brandon Ingram where he looks like a point guard out there, hitting people in the corners and things like that. And so, again, it's not so much about Brandon Ingram, the scoring output from this team. I think we kind of got over that hump early in this tournament when you kind of saw how Steve Kerr and those guys were using Brandon Ingram. But if you can get Brandon Ingram to come home with some of this passing, some of this renewed commitment to team and things like that, and doing the things that is necessary, right? He only had 2 rebounds against Lithuania, but a lot of the team didn't rebound, including the starting center who didn't rebound at all. But I think you're starting to see him hit the boards a little more. I think you're starting to see him get more engaged on defense, and seeing him with the ball in his hands and creating and being a guy that could be an offensive hub with guys who are getting off the ball in Austin Reeves and Tyrese Halliburton. I think it's a much better fit. And I think, it's going to be tough moving forward, right? The Team USA got lucky by losing, really. And now they're on the side of the bracket. I called the other side of the bracket from the USA the Hunger Games on Twitter, because there's Lithuania with JV, who should be USA. You got Slovenia with Luka. You got Germany with Dennis Schroeder and the Wagner brothers. And then obviously you have Canada with Shea and Dylan Brooks and those guys. So the Team USA got lucky by being on the side of the bracket that they are. They have Italy, and then they'll play a lesser team than whoever that is on the other side of the bracket. I think they'll get through these 2 games, and then we'll see in that championship game whether it's Lithuania, whether it's Slovenia, whether it's Germany, whether it's Canada. Team USA can lose all of those games. They can lose against all 4 of those teams if they aren't prepared. So should be interesting to go, but hopefully Brandon Ingram can kind of get adjusted and acclimated quickly to this new role on the bench, and we'll see how he moves moving forward.
You talk about new role again. JV looked pretty dominant. Like nothing
the
US could do for him. If there's a spot for JV, I'm telling you, the Pelicans, if they can figure out how to maximize JV, there is a role that he could be an integral part for this team. So you talk about new beginnings. Again, shout out Will Guillory posting, the updates on Zion, his workout regimen, and he seems to be locked and loaded and ready to hit the. When was the last time Zion was like day 1 training camp, ready to go? No questions around his. Is he recovered? Things like that. Like, again, the momentum's headed in the right place. And again, like, the Pelicans are going to go as far as Brandon Ingram, and they're going to go as far as Zion Williamson take them. And their availability ultimately will determine whether or not the Pelicans go anywhere next season. But, like, when you really look at this team, you've got 2 young stars. Brandon Ingram, shout out, he turned 26 this week. It's crazy. He's just 26 years old. I feel like Brandon Ingram's been in the NBA for forever. Zion turning 23 earlier this summer. Then you've got CJ McCollum, a veteran in a lot of ways, both, again, on and off the court, as a leader, as a scorer, as a player, as a person, things like that. Look at what JV's doing, in terms of his durability and the example that he says that I'm available night in and night out. You look at that starting 5 and people say, that is the reason why the Pelicans will be good. That is the reason that everyone has the Pelicans as their dark horse. And most teams, you would say that they've got, during the regular season, 10 to 11 players that they feel good about, that we're going to battle with. And if someone's out, we're good. We can keep rolling because they fit in a certain spot. And in the postseason, you get about 8 or 9. The crazy thing about the Pelicans is you can make an honest case that they've got 10 rotational players, like 10 that would probably be on rotation on just about any team. You've got those top 6, the alphabet boys, and then throw TM3 Trey Murphy with that 6 as well. And then you've got Najee Marshall, who averaged 15 points as a starter last season. You've got Jose Alvarado, who showed up in his first experience in the playoffs versus the Suns, gave the Suns everything they wanted and more. The lights were not too big for him. Larry Nance is a career rotational player. That's exactly what he does. And then Dyson Daniels had games where he almost won the game last season, right? And so you've got 10 solid players that you feel good about night in and night out. And then you got the unknowns. You got the Kyle Lewis, still only 22 years old. and really been more a victim of circumstances and injuries than anything, right? And then the rookies, Jordan Hawkins, EJ Liddell, and then shout out Cody Zeller, man. If he's in the rotation, things have gone down south very, very quickly, right? And so you look at that crop, and it's hard to look at that and say, man, the Pelicans have anything but momentum going into the season. Like, that group of 10, only 2 of them are over 26 years old. Like, that's quite a group to grow from. And even then, you look at the season, you say the Pelicans didn't have enough. David Griffin said they didn't have enough. They said that they've got to build a roster knowing that Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson are not going to play all 82 games. They would love if they play 65 games, right? But ultimately, you've got to have a roster that's got enough to kind of stack up and fill in the gaps when somebody goes down or inevitably somebody misses a long stretch of time. But at the same time, they did make the playoffs. Last year was disappointing from pretty much everyone's standards. But if you look at the bench and you look at what the depth of this team looked at, they were 7th in net rating. Now, they were 23rd in offensive rating, which we'll get to, and that's pretty much not acceptable going into this season. They were 5th in defensive rating. They were 8th in plus minus, and they were 10th in pace, right? Like, they were a good bench, even though you look at it and you're like, how? Because Trey Murphy started 65 games. Like, the main player who was going to generate offense for this group was in the starting lineup because the top 2 are not available. So you look at that, you look at all the missed time, not from just B.I. and Zion, but also from Jose missing 21 games, from EJ missing the whole season, from Dyson missing 25 games. Like, the whole team missed a lot of times, but you look at this roster and you look at this offseason and the lack of movement, and you say, even though you kind of had a good bench last year, there's a room for it to get a lot better. So my question to you is, how much better do you think this group, with the extra off season of seasoning and practice and work and grind and growth from a X's and O's standpoint, but also from a body physique standpoint, how much better can the second line be?
That's an excellent breakdown that you had about the Pelicans bench last season. And I think, from a holistic standpoint, if you take a step back, I mean, what the Pelicans went through as far as health-wise to their bench, because of the health-wise of their starters, was something that, a lot of teams just would not be able to get over, not be able to power through. And for the Pelicans, obviously didn't make the playoffs, but to be, in that play-in tournament with so many guys missing, outside of the big 2 who missed the majority of the season, it's just a testament to the coaching of Willie Green, right? Being able to keep those guys together, and then also just the depth, right? The depth of the roster, but the depth of the roster only gets flexed when the depth is available, and I think that's what you're going to see, this season. To start off with, obviously the bench can get a lot better from just being available, right? If Zion and Brandon Ingram are available, then either Trey Murphy is coming off the bench, or some people believe that CJ is to fold into that. Either way it goes, you should get a boost just from one of those guys being available for the bench role, right? It's probably going to be Trey Murphy. Just to have him back into the bench where he could come in spots, right? And in moments, obviously he's going to play a lot of minutes, but there are moments where Trey Murphy is just unconscious for stretches of times. And having the ability to go up against, the 3rd or 4th or 5th best defender on the floor, especially if he's going against bench units. I mean, he should be able to, his growth should be able to increase the scoring on that team. Now, when you talk about some of the other guys, right? Jose, the heart and soul of the team, is on the bench, right? He's a guy, and he immediately changes the game, just off of energy and off of effort. That's gonna help that defense of the ball, right? That's gonna help increase that. And I think if you get this bench right, and with enough, all of these offensive weapons the Pelicans have, I think if you look at the second line, right? If you look at the second line, I think they're gonna be mixed in so much with the rotation with the starters, right? When you talk about if B.I. and Zion are available, Trey Murphy's going to be out there with one of those guys. Going to be out there with Brandon Ingram and Zion. Larry Nance, obviously, like Willie Green loves to play Larry Nance as a pseudo 6 starter, right? When JV sits down. So you have all of these guys who are going to be mixed and matched with that team. So what you want is that each of these guys to grow into their role so that the bench can integrate with the starters, and you have a cohesive unit as opposed to having this group of guys who all have to play substantial minutes because the others aren't able to be there. And so guys like Najee, right, guys like Dyson Daniels, who are going to be those extra wings, those extra guardish wings. When you talk about Dyson Daniels, those guys are going to be super important for their growth because, like you said, Brandon Ingram and Zion aren't playing all 82. And so what are you working on that when your number is called, right, when it's your time, Dyson might not play a lot of games, Najee might not play a lot of games, and then all of a sudden be thrust into the starting lineup. And what makes them so valuable is that they're able to contribute in those moments. And so you need these guys to come back with a renewed focus. And I think that they have the opportunity to be better just off the strength of availability. I think that offensive rate number 23 in the league at the end of the season, I think that is something that can be immediately changed with having Trey Murphy available for that bench unit. And if they can just stay par for the rest of the things that they did last season, what they did well, this is one of the best benches in the league.
Right. So you mentioned some of the things that they need to do differently. Again, they were 25th in the NBA in 3-point percentage, the bench. They were 23rd in 3-pointers taken. You just talked about it. Moving Trey Murphy to that unit should help that a lot, right? Like a big impact. Like Trey should be taking starter type shots, right? Just coming off the bench from that perspective. But then again, you go and add the best shooter in the draft. You're bringing in EJ Liddell for his rookie season, which he's a guy who shot over 37% from 3 in college. One of your defenders, like, again, the Fred Vinson shooting clinic this summer need to be every day, 24 hours. Between Dyson, Najee, Larry, and Jose, one of them, none of them were over 36% from 3. One of them has to be able to step up, or like we've talked about in previous pod, at least be able to hit the corner ones at a consistent clip right now. Because you're right, like, it's much different when Brandon Ingram sits down or CJ McCollum sits down and there's nobody else. You're throwing it to Najee like, Najee, go run the offense. Like, that's a much different situation than Brandon Ingram sits down, but Zion's still on the court, right? And so you've got other guys that are taking better quality shots. And so the number of threes should increase because the quality of your threes should increase as well. So you look at those things, but how do you feel about the fluidity and the flexibility from Willie Green and the coaching staff? Because even though, you know, again, the team was working from a disadvantage, you've got your blue-collar guys working at a ridiculous pace just to keep up and keep you in the race, and that's what broke them down. But I do feel like there were opportunities to get some of the guys, the Jackson Hayes, the Kyra Lewises, the Dyson Daniels at times, get those guys in the game and give you something different, right? And so being able to use them in different ways, using the depth of your bench and using the different talent. If you've got all these guys that are NBA players, use them, right? Like, there's no reason why you've got to stick with the rotation that you came in with, right? Versus adjusting on the flies. How do you feel about that? And what are you looking for from the changes on the offensive point to make this bench unit better?
Yeah, that's got to be a major point of growth for Willie Green. And I think bringing in James Borrego is going to help fix that, you know, and help give him, you know, another voice in his ear that he trusts, hopefully to tell him, hey, it's okay, you know, in game 13, 14, 20 to, you know, play some of these guys down the bench. And I think one guy in particular that I'm watching for is Jordan Hawkins. I'm watching for Jordan Hawkins. Like, I understand that, you know, he's a rookie and he struggles on the defensive end, the defensive side of the ball, right? Because he's so slight and things like that. And Willie Green is going to have to go from somebody who, you know, in this scenario I'm talking about, he's going to have to go from somebody who does not play you at all if you are defensive bereft to somebody who's going to give this rookie a chance. Because what I think is that Jordan Hawkins brings something to the table that the Pelicans haven't had in maybe ever in their franchise history. And I think you're going to have to play him in order to get that benefit. And when I say you have to play him, I think you have to deal with some of those defensive lapses and things that he might go through. If you surround him with enough with other guys. And I think he's going to have to give him an opportunity to play through some of these mistakes, to play through some of the things that he's going to go through in order to benefit at the end. We saw last season Jackson and Kyra play sporadically, very rarely play. And then when it was time with the season on the line, Willie Green was turning to Jackson Hayes and Kyra Lewis, and he did them a disservice by doing that because he put them out there when they were not ready. They were not used to playing. And again, these are obviously NBA players and you want these guys to be ready, but these are young players who rely a lot on playing time and development. And I think Jordan Hawkins is one of those. And I think because his best skill set is shooting, he's going to be needed more than ever than someone like Kyra and somebody like Jackson, right? Obviously, Jackson and Kyra bought things, but they didn't bring the type of shooting that Jordan Hawkins can possibly bring. And so I think you're going to need him, and Willie Green has to find ways to get him to get him minutes on the floor, even some minutes with some of the starters, right? Like you get the best out of him from the gravitation from Zion and Brandon Ingram. Willie Green is going to have to give him opportunities to play so that he can grow, and that in the event that you need some shooting at the end of the season, which we have saw over and over again that the Pelicans need, that he's not a guy that you're throwing in, with his eyes are buck wide open. So Willie Green's going to have to do a lot of growing up and a lot of maturity as far as in the NBA circle, as with his flexibility in his rosters and in his game plan, because he's going to need some of these guys to either get them through the season, or he's going to need them at one point in time when the season is on the line. And you don't want to, the first time these guys have seen playing time in the playoffs in 2 months, in 3 months, that doesn't do anybody. It doesn't help anybody. And it just makes the player look bad, and it makes the coaching staff and it makes the team look bad. So he has to be ready to play these guys and let them get that experience as the season goes on.
Yeah, you see a recent example of that with Christian Braun, the rookie who was with the Nuggets just last season, got worked along slowly all throughout the year, and he was ready, and he delivered, and he played some great minutes in that finals, in the playoffs altogether. But you don't really have to look that far away from Willie Green, too. Like, you saw it happen with Trey. You saw it happen with Jose. Herb started out of injury, out of necessity, but you saw him work them along all throughout the season because he trusted the defensive point and because he had to at some points. When you've got a plethora of options, it's hard to manage development versus, hey, we're trying to win a game today, things like that. But you bring up a good point in Jordan Hawkins in that he just brings something to the team that, one, it desperately needs if everyone's healthy or if everyone's not, but two, that they just haven't had in a while. Even JJ Redick, again, that was the twilight year, so it wasn't the JJ that you're used to and things like that. But do you think, again, you look at this Pelicans roster and you say, outside of CJ and BI and Zion and JV when he gets the ball, there's not a whole lot of shot creators. There's not a whole lot of dribble penetration, even though Dykeman Najee can be fun at times. There's just not a whole lot of that. That's why people were looking for, maybe that's what they go get, a Kobe Buffkin, or that's what they go get in the draft, because you're missing that. Do you think that Jordan Hawkins can bring that type of offense where maybe it's not him creating the shots off the dribble with dribble penetration, but his gravity from a shooting is the best option for the Pelicans as they look to kind of grow and take a next step, this season off the bench? Or do you think there's someone else that may be able to take a step and help in the area if somebody's down or two people are down?
Well, I think the answer, the obvious answer to that is Trey Murphy, right? Can Trey Murphy become a guy who can put the ball on the ground and do some of the shot creation? We saw glimpses of it. But I think, one of the, and I think it's a first world problem staring the Pelicans in their face that it might turn into a second or third world problem really quickly. Is the CJ McCollum? Is CJ McCollum? Because, like you said, there isn't a lot of shot creation, especially when you talk about the bench, right? And you talk about Jose and Trey, and hopefully Trey grows into that, but that's not what he is right now. Dykeman Najee is an experience. And that's really it, right? Jordan Hawkins obviously can do some things, like you said, with his gravity. But shot creation, if you're talking about just with the bench unit, it's just not there. And I think, again, we've mentioned it, we've kind of skirted around it. I think, it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, right? CJ got on the spaces and nobody really asked him. And it's just one of those things that you don't know about, right? And it's, can CJ McCollum lead a six-man unit and be the shot creator, off the bench, and have Trey Murphy in the starting lineup, where Trey Murphy's gravity with his shooting can pair well with the gravity of JV, Brandon Ingram. It's very similar. BI and Trey Murphy call each other twins. It's like an opposite variant situation where, Trey doesn't need the ball the way that CJ McCollum does. It can be effective in that way. Whereas CJ kind of has to have the ball in order to be the best version of CJ McCollum. And you're not going to have that with those two guys and Brandon Ingram and Zion on the floor. Especially what BI went through. BI about to come into this locker room. We're going through with FIBA. You about to go to the locker room like, listen,
give it a ball.
It's us. It's us. All right. I don't want to even see the corner no more. But hopefully BI comes back and it does the catch and shoot thing. But I just think he's gonna come back like, all right, let me start reminding these people that who I am, so they can stop playing with me. But it's one of those things where CJ and his contract, they staring the Pelicans in the face with Trey Murphy and those guys. So I think that Trey is like the answer, the obvious answer. What does his development look like? Can he start putting it on the ground? But I think, like, honestly, and I'm gonna continue to beat this drum. The best version of the Pelicans may be with CJ McCollum leading a six-man charge. Now, is he ready to do that? Is he there in that part of his career? Is he ready to do that with a franchise that hasn't really established itself as a winner, so that people want to sacrifice for this team? They haven't established that, so maybe it doesn't happen. But I do think that is one of the situations where CJ could come in and thrive against second units, and Trey Murphy can be placed in the starting lineup and play off of the gravity that Zion and BI create.
Sure. I think to start the year, again, I think it's hard to take CJ out the starting lineup. Again, by the end of the year, who knows? Again, you haven't been able to fail with the lineups and with the roster to know this is the adjustment we need to make. That's part of the frustration here. So maybe throughout the season they go through some bumps and they realize this is what's best for the team, because I agree with you. It makes too much sense on the surface. But again, you gotta watch it play out. There's personality, there's people, there's a lot money, there's a lot of things involved when it comes to making those types of decisions. What I would say is, though, again, you saw a little bit of it from Jose at the beginning of the season before he got hurt. He was getting a little bit more confident, attacking and doing some different things that he worked out with Tony Parker, added some offensive things to his arsenal. And I think that there are times where Jose can be more aggressive. I don't know if he's ever going to be the person that consistently initiates your offense, but I think there's areas for him to grow. But in a pinch, again, all we can do is go off of history, and history is not kind in the injury department. In a pinch, again, it's a luxury for this team to have a Kyra Lewis and a Darion Seaborn on the team. They are the fastest players on the team. They have the best dribble penetration outside of probably anyone but Zion in terms of getting to the cup and forcing the defense to make adjustments. If they're your third, fourth, fifth option in terms of what you're being able to do going into the season, I think that's a good spot to be in. Because, again, I went back and watched some old Kyra games. I feel like he's just been in a terrible spot where Jose came in and won over the lineup and won over the relationship with Brandon Ingram, won over the city, or won over the Smoothie King Center. And Kyra's like, but what about me, right? And Willie Green said that in the last season, he was like, Kyra showing us stuff in practice that we got to put him out there. And there was times in the games, we were at the Dallas game, Kyra came in and scored 12 points in 5 minutes. And it's man, there's something there. And so if he's your breaking case of emergency, I just think that's a better spot to be in than last season. So one more question before we get out of here. And I think it's important because, again, the Pelicans, before the injury bug starts to bite, they're just such a deep roster. And there's a lot of ways this bench can morph and play differently depending on what pieces of the starting lineups are in there. But and don't say Trey Murphy. Who of the Pelicans second line of their reserve players, who's the biggest wild card for you? Where, hey, they may have a small, quiet season, and it may not be that impactful. But man, if they hit the right roll and the right momentum and they get going, it takes the Pelicans to a different level.
It's a good question. And so I think it's Trey Murphy. I'm just kidding. All right.
But you see Larry Ness was like, I need some more Trey Murphy haters because the whole world is following Trey Murphy.
Hey, bro. Hey, that dude, man. But I think it's gonna be Dyson, man. I think it's gonna be Dyson Daniels. I think, he's another guy that, he was a lanyard pick, right? We talk about the Pelican situation and having all of this like extra talent and things. Like, he was a lanyard pick, like the pick. Nobody expected, the Lakers to have the pick the season that they had, and that pick fell into the Pelicans' pocket, and they took Dyson Daniels. And listen, there are things that Dyson does, every so often where you like, this is interesting. And there have been conversations where I've had with people who say like they see Dyson Daniels as either a point guard off the bench or maybe like a steady veteran point guard, as he grows and grows like a steady sub-in point guard if you need to. And I think that if he hits his ceiling defensively and aggressively, right? Because we've seen Dyson do some athletic things. It's just not consistently. If he gets to his his ceiling defensively and aggressively, I think that he has an opportunity to be Herb Jones light on the wing, but also initiate offense as a point guard. And his passing ability. Say what you want, Dyson Daniels can play defense and he can pass the ball. And I think that those two things work so well with a team with so many, wing guys in the starting lineups and guards in the back where you can't really fit him into a wing rotation because you have Trey and B.I. and Zion and all of those guys. And then when you think about the guards, when you have CJ and Jose, that you need somebody who can play in between and slide down to the guard if a guard is out, or you need some more ball movement, or slide up to the wing if you need another defender to bring in, or one of the defenders are out, or Herb is out, or one of those things. So to have a guy that can do both because he's so tall, but also has the skill set of a guard, is such a key and such a important position on a team that I think if he hits his ceiling, or even if he just starts to develop and we start to see a different version of Dyson, that he unlocks the Pelicans to another gear, because the way he plays and the pace that he plays at, I think it helps take a lot of stress off of Zion and Brandon Ingram, because they're not going and facing 5 and 6 people in the paint every time. If he could get it up in transition and get those guys easy baskets. So I think Dyson is the wild card for me.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the Lonzo role, right? Like when Lonzo and Zion had it going, like that's beautiful basketball to watch. Dyson has a lot of that in him in terms of his ability to push the pace, pick 6 plays where he's turning a steal into a half-court lob design. Like, that type of play is something that the Pelicans missed last year. Like, they were a slower-paced team, even though they're a younger team and a really athletic team. Obviously, Dyson, to your point, he's the insurance for Herb. In case something were to go bad, you got another defender you feel just as comfortable guarding KD, guarding Giannis. Like, he had to do all that as a rookie. He's still the youngest guy on the team. So I agree with you. Like, that's a safe pick. He's also a great rebounder, and the Pelicans struggled to rebound without Zion last year. I'm going with, I want to say EJ Liddell, just because I think he's important to keeping Larry upright. Like, I think those two need to share minutes so that Larry can make it to the postseason. But, bro, I'm going to go with somebody who's not on the Pelicans 14 right now. I'm going with Liam
I already
Robbins.
know who you're saying. I already know, yeah.
This is why. Again, he may not make the team. He may not make the two-way. But the Pelicans are really bad in 2 areas: shooting the 3 and defending the paint. Those happen to be 2 areas that Liam Robinson was really good at in college. Like, he was the SEC Player of the Year in college, doing those 2 things well, right? And obviously, he's recovering from an injury. He's going to try to work in training camp in these upcoming weeks to try to gain a spot. But for a wild card, again, he could never play a minute for the Pelicans, and I still feel pretty confident that the Pelicans, if B.I. and Zion are healthy, will be all right without Liam Robbins. But if they happen to find, a Cody, listen, if they're able to find that in this version, in the Liam Rahman version, like that's exactly what this team is missing. Like somebody who can stand at the rim, block shots, not a liability on the court offensively, which he's not at all. He's also a good rebounder, which Larry Nance is not. EJ Liddell, we don't know yet. Cody Zeller, again, you don't want him playing a whole lot of minutes, right? And so, like, if you're going to need someone in a pinch because JV can't switch or whatever it may be to close out a game, like, who knows, right? And so that's my biggest wild card, just because it addresses the Pelicans areas that they're weakest in right now. So that's all we got for the show. Again, the Pelicans have one of those benches and one of those rosters that they're set up to complement one another. As soon as you take the main ingredients away, the rest of the ingredients don't look as good. But as soon as you put them back in the man, you got a fire meal. So again, when they put it all together, again, the Pelicans have a really high ceiling. But that's all we got for the show today. Again, FIBA World Cup is this week. The United States got a couple cracks at it, and again, we'll see how they respond. I can't imagine they'll come out flat after losing in a kind of an embarrassing way from that standpoint. The NFL starts this week on Thursday. 2K is released this week for all of those that celebrate. So it is a big week in sports. But what you got left for the people, guys?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. Yes, the Pelicans team, it is one of the deepest teams in the NBA, but it only works if everybody's available. The depth is only can be as good as it is when it can be flexed. When you start taking people away, then people start doing other things, and we get, what we got last season. Not great. So, as always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler on X. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO Basketball, no E. Most importantly, subscribe to New Orleans.network, New Orleans.basketball, and we'll see you guys next time.